The unprecedented pace of disruption and uncertainty makes leadership more relevant today than ever before. It is not position or power, but your leadership skills that help you to think in unique, creative ways. When faced with a crisis, a leader is forced to think and make critical decisions. A leader who empowers a team and gives the employees accountability increases the effectiveness of an organization. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Warren Bennett says leadership is the capacity to turn vision into reality. And Bill Gates says, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Today, I have the honor of welcoming Ivan Leybourn. Ivan is the founder and CEO of the Business Agility Institute, an international membership body to both champion and support the next generation of organizations. Companies that are agile, innovative, and dynamic, perfectly designed to thrive in today's unpredictable markets. His experience while holding senior leadership and board positions in both private industry and government has driven his work in business agility, and he regularly speaks on these topics at local and international industry conferences. As well as leading the Business Agility Institute, Ivan is also the author of Directing the Agile Organization, a culture of continuous value. Ivan, welcome to this interview.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to begin by asking you, what do you think are 3 traits that a project manager or a leader should have to thrive in a disruptive economy?
So I'm gonna add to the conversation and say that there is leadership and then there is management. Right? And you mentioned the quote that leadership is influence, right? But I'll also say management is skill, and skills can be learned. And I do recognize that there are other kinds of leaders. There are thought leaders and community leaders. You don't have to be a manager to be a leader. That's a given. However, in many organizations, a leader doesn't have to be a manager, but a manager does have to be a leader. Right? So the Venn diagram does overlap quite significantly. So when we talk about the traits, I'm going to focus not so much on the traits of leadership, but the traits of management as a subset of leadership, because these are vitally important. And I'll put it in, and you asked for 3, so I'll give you 3. The first one is delegation. And I don't mean delegation of work, I mean delegation of outcomes. Right? Being able to give ownership of work to individuals and give them the trust and the support so that they can be successful. And specifically, they can be successful, not you. 2, a manager or a leader needs to be able to communicate a vision. And they need to be able to identify what is, they need to be able to identify the path between what is and what could be. And they need to be able to inspire and communicate that path and that vision to the people that are around them. And the third is, I would say, around what I call strategic agility, or emergent strategy, or adaptive strategy. The ability for a leader to create strategic decisions on a rapid and regular basis. And that skill is doubly relevant right now during the COVID-19 crisis.
Absolutely. 3 great points: delegation of outcomes, communication and vision, and strategic decision making. Which brings me to my second question about leading in a crisis. So how does a leader respond to a crisis? What are some effective parts of that response strategy?
So I think the key you've asked is, the key word is respond. And what we're seeing out there is some companies and managers and leaders are reacting to the crisis, and some are responding to the crisis. And so that ability to keep keep that vision of your customers' needs, keep that vision of your strategic intent, and make strategic and operational decisions on a like day-to-day basis, right, while keeping all of that in mind. And in a crisis situation, you're making decisions every single day. Right? The other companies are the ones who are reacting. They are the ones who are seeing a challenge, who are they're making decisions every day, just like an agile organization, just like an agile leader are making those decisions every day. The only difference is the company that is reacting is doing so without that strategic thread, that narrative thread between the decision they made yesterday and the decision that they will make tomorrow. And so a leader, right, a strong leader, an agile organization, is one that is able to make those decisions strategically, rapidly, and continuously, versus just reacting in a disconnected form.
Yeah. So it's about being nimble and agile when a crisis strikes.
I would being strategically nimble, right? Because you can be tactically nimble, operationally nimble, but again, if you don't have that connective, that narrative thread, then yeah, your decisions are disconnected and will end up breaking you and your organization.
Now we come to taking a leader and a team. How does a leader keep the team motivated and connected? And what type of support can you give your employees during a crisis?
So that's a big one, because a key part of developing people, whether it's in a crisis or not, is it's the people who are around you. So a strong leader is one who surrounds themselves by people who are better than them, who have greater skills. And this is a problem with many organizations today, because we structure our organizations based on an apprentice system from like 1,000 years ago. So in a functional hierarchy, my boss is my skill superior, right? They are better at my job than I am because they have more experience or they have more capability. And if I'm a blacksmith and I apprentice myself to a master blacksmith because I want to learn to be a better blacksmith, and that metaphor, that model has applied itself into modern organizations today. So the problem is that in a crisis situation where we are structured around, we're optimized for skills transfer, your boss, or you as a boss, you are better at your subordinate's job than they are. Right? Just by the very nature of how we have structured. You have more experience, you have more capability, ... The problem with that is in a crisis situation, we tend to become very reactive. There's that word again. Right? And we focus not on growing people, not on growing their skills and their capability, which is what we should be doing, but we just focus on solving the problem. And who can solve an immediate problem better than you can? Right? Because you have more skills. Right? So as managers, as leaders, in many cases, we are forgetting what it takes to support and to develop and to help our teams grow, because we're just so focused on solving the problem that we take it all upon ourselves, because, as I said, we can do it faster, we can do it better, or at least we think we can. So in a crisis situation, leaders have to be willing to let go of that crisis fight or flight response. Leaders have to be able to look at their staff and turn around and say, this is yours. You need to do this, not me. Right? I'm here to help you do it. I'm here to get whatever you need out of the way so that you can do it. Right? But that's all on you. Right? And that kind of that reactionary response is not common.
What do you think is one of the big challenges that you have faced as a project manager or a leader?
Do you mean in the crisis or just generally?
No, just like that.
Okay, so for me, I haven't been a project manager for a while. It's been a good, let's say, 15 years since I've really managed a project. Well, maybe 10 or 12. Right now, I'm a community leader. My job is, I run a research organization, right? And my job is to help organizations using research and data to show them just what is possible. So the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is figuring out how to support the community, because it's not about us as an organization, it's about the ecosystem, all of the organizations coming together. And so if we can't find a way of supporting and engaging them in a meaningful and long-term way, then why do we exist?
Now, if you see, we have moved from localization and face-to-face meetings, and we have more tools like Zoom, Skype, Google Meets, WhatsApp, Slack, and whatnot. So how do you lead effectively in a virtual workplace?
So that's a tough question, actually. I'm going to say, I'm just going to give a one-word answer: trust. Right? And I think no one likes to think of themselves as a micromanager. Right? Everyone thinks that they give their team space and let them do their own things. But even subconsciously, many managers, many leaders, when you walk the floor, right? You come out of your office, you walk around, you say hi to people. You're not micromanaging, but kind of all of those cues, all of those visual and non-visual cues that you pick up all around you. You know what's going on. You have this very subtle but ever-present understanding of the business and the people and what is happening. And when we're remote, we lose all of that. All that remains is the direct communication, the Zoom calls, right? Any of the subtle, any of the non-verbal, any of the just the zeitgeist of what is going on is lost. And a lot of managers really struggle with that and are sort of reverting back into sort of micromanagement. I need to know what you're doing, because they don't have those subtle cues. So as a manager, as a leader, we need to understand that we've lost those subtle cues and accept that we have lost them. We need to just recognize that we need to move on, and if our teams have a problem, or there is a problem that we will discover, but we're not there yet. I think a lot of managers really struggle.
In terms of risk, many companies were taken by surprise at the beginning of this year when the COVID-19 pandemic struck. How do you preempt such a risk as COVID and factor it into our risk management plan?
You don't. And so there's two things here. One is most organizations don't understand risk. Risk management is an entire science in and of itself. Right? And I've worked with a lot of organizations that treat risk as something to be avoided rather than something to be understood and to be accepted. Right? I'll ask an organization, what's your risk appetite? And they won't know how to answer that question. Right? If they do, you'll get different answers depending on who you ask. Right? So now you go to a hospital, they know risk. Right? Right? People die every single day in a hospital. Right? Right? Every time a doctor goes into surgery, right? Right? They recognize and they know how to handle that risk. And that risk is someone might die. You know what? For most of our businesses, that all of our risks are less than someone might die. Right? So this paranoia that most organizations have around risk and risk management is a problem. So the first part is actually understanding risk and what risk means. So that's just the element of risk management. But the second part to your question is you can't predict COVID-19, right? And I know a lot of organizations are trying to figure out what's going to come next. And you know what? I don't know, but I don't need to know. What's important is not to be able to predict the future, but to be able to adapt to whatever the future happens to bring, right? And to be able to adapt quickly. Right? So I know there will be another crisis. I don't know what it is. Right? COVID-19 is not the only crisis we've had in the last 10, 20 years. From 9/11 to the global financial crisis, to various currency crashes, the Arab Spring, different revolutions. Crisis is a natural state in the global economy. Right? None of them are predictable. And sure, someone's going to say they predicted X, Y, and Z, but a broken clock is right twice a day. So a big part of this is developing that muscle memory to be able to adapt, to be able to figure out what agility means, to figure out how they're going to change when the next crisis hits. And to be honest, while COVID-19 is a big one, I think we're going to see some bigger crises in the next 10, 15 years.
What do you see as a future for project managers?
So from a project management standpoint, so I'm a Prince 2 practitioner. I'm an MSP practitioner. Back before they started expiring. So I still am, even though I haven't done it for quite a while. I also wrote a book called No Projects, right? And one of the things that I talk about is not that there won't be projects, right? Because of course there will be, right? But that our current understanding of project management will evolve. This idea that a project is a temporary endeavor to deliver a unique product, service, or result, or whatever the specific definition of a project is. The problem with that definition is that there is no such thing as a unique or a temporary endeavor anymore. If you're building a bridge, you're always going to use a project. It makes absolute sense because you can't add features to a bridge. Right? There is a very clear delineation between build and maintain. Right? However, outside of that bridge, outside of those few cases, especially in knowledge work, the line between build, enhance, and maintain is very, very fuzzy. So what I think a lot of project managers are going to start moving into is less about managing discrete pieces of work and more about managing continuous flow of value. So while there is value, while there is a positive ROI in a particular product and developing on a product, then that product will continue to be invested in. And a project manager, this concept of time, cost, scope goes away because there is no, the end date is when the ROI starts to plateau or go negative, right? And if you have this uncertain end date, because it's ROI is an outcome measure, not an output measure, then all of the project management tools, or not all of them, but many of them start to become redundant. So I think there's going to be a new generation of project managers, a new set of skills and techniques and technologies for project managers to be able to manage and handle that sort of continuous product flow. And you can read books like From Project to Product, No Projects, all that kind of stuff.
We come to the final question. Do you have any words of advice for youngsters or millennials who wish to take up a career in leadership or project management?
Leadership management is a skill, right? And when I was younger, I had this very arrogant assumption that, I'll put it a different way. I would never imagine I could become a doctor without training, or a nurse without training, or a vet without training, or an engineer without training. Hell, I wouldn't even imagine I could become a brickie or a carpenter without training. Yet somehow we all sort of assume that management is an intrinsic skill, that just because you're good at your job, whether it's accounting or surgery or software development, we kind of assume that we can become a manager. And somehow, ironically, managers get paid more. So we're basically talking about an unskilled, untrained, yet highly paid workforce who are going into this management role. And we have, unfortunately, enabled that assumption all across the world. And I was guilty of that when I first became a manager. And I was not a very good manager when I first became a manager for that very reason. So to become a leader, to become a manager as a subset of leadership, requires specific skills. And in the same way that you went to university to learn how to become a software developer or an accountant or a doctor, you need to go and learn how to become a leader. The skills that you need can be trained, must be practiced, and if once you've done that, then you can become a manager. Then you can be, then you will be a leader, whether you are promoted into a manager or not. But you need to develop those skills. It is not intrinsic, no matter how much you feel like it, you can do it.
Thank you so much, Evan, for sharing your insights and experience on all those questions that I posed to you. It was a pleasure listening to you, and I'm sure those who listen to this video will benefit from it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate talking to you. And obviously, if anyone has any questions or want to talk to me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or on the Business Agility Institute website. Always happy to have a conversation about this.